Hello, this is Neil Fortin, and this is an overview of nutrition labeling changes for 2016. This is just an overview of what's different, a quick look at the new label. What's most prominent is the larger, bolder type for serving size and for calories. No, those aren't my diplomas, they're my regulations. This is really an area where you really must accept that you will have to go into the regulations and look at the details on anything that is pertinent to your label. This is an overview, and this and the text are designed to give you an idea of where you should look and when you should look, but you really need to go to the regulations. I've listed the two new regulations in the course materials. I also recommend on pertinent areas where you have questions that you read the preamble that's listed in the Federal Register before the new rule.
Two new regulations. The first is the revised Nutrition Facts panel, the formatting, and the revised Supplement Facts panel, how it is laid out. There also is a separate rule on revising the serving sizes, which are based upon the RACs, the reference amounts customarily consumed. The serving sizes necessarily also affect the claims that can be made on the product, so these are very important.
So here is a side-by-side, the original 1990 Nutrition Facts and the new 2016. The emphasis on calories is very clear. This is important because many Americans consume too many calories, and this is one of the more important nutrient pieces of information they should take from the label. The type size for calories has gone from 8-point to 16-point minimum, and the numeric value for calories has now increased to a 22-point type minimum. Two mandatory nutrients were removed from the label: calories from fat and other carbohydrates. These can no longer be listed even as voluntary nutrients on the label. Calories from fat is being removed because the research suggests that it's the type of fat that's most important rather than the amount. So it's determined that this information is not necessary to consumers to maintain a healthy diet. The other carbohydrate was a voluntary nutrient. It was defined as the difference between total carbohydrate and the sum of dietary fiber and sugar. So it really represents mostly some starch and a few other compounds that is not very digestible. It's removed from the label because there's no quantitative intake recommendation and there's no scientific evidence that there's any public health significance. 3 nutrient listings were added to the mandatory nutrients: vitamin D, potassium, and added sugar. When research was reviewed for the new labeling regulations, it was recommended to FDA that these 3 be added as mandatory nutrients, and FDA took that recommendation, and the amounts must be listed as well as a percent daily value, if the nutrient has a daily value, and with some exceptions on the listings, as you actually can see here. Vitamin D is listed. You don't have the heading for daily value here. It's listed as 0 because it is 0, but the heading is not here on this. This is a label that's only allowed on certain size packages where there's not enough room to actually list the column heading. Vitamin D is, again, if you are using an abbreviated label format, you really need to read the details in the regulation. Vitamin D is a nutrient of which Americans do not get enough. So it was added as a mandatory nutrient to be listed. It's important in bone health. It's also very important because if you don't get enough vitamin D, this contributes to a number of chronic diseases. Vitamin D had been a voluntary nutrient unless the food was fortified or a claim was made. Now it's mandatory. Notice also it is now listed as micrograms per serving rather than international units. This change follows a recommendation by the Institute of Medicine because it is a more accurate measurement of the amount of vitamin D. IU for vitamin D can still be listed voluntarily in addition to the micrograms, so the IU would be listed in parentheses following micrograms. Potassium is another nutrient of which Americans do not get enough. It is a necessary mineral that helps lower blood pressure, and when it is lacking in the diet, people are at an increased risk of chronic disease of a number of types. Potassium also has been voluntary, unless it was added voluntarily to the food. So like vitamin D, potassium is now a mandatory nutrient. You will list it in the amount per milligrams and also the amount as a percent of the daily value. Added sugars is the most controversial addition. It's a carbohydrate that Americans get too much of. We'll talk about added sugar, the definition, a little bit more in a moment, but basically it's sugar that does not occur naturally in the food. Considerable research shows that excess consumption of added sugar makes it difficult to consume enough essential vitamins and minerals to stay healthy. The Dietary Guideline Committee, the American Heart Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Institute of Medicine, and the World Health Organization all recommend decreasing the intake of added sugar. So added sugar was added by FDA to the label to bring this to the attention of consumers and make it easier for them to consume a healthy diet. Under the new regulations, added sugar includes sugars, of course, monosaccharides and disaccharides. It includes sugars from syrup and honey. It includes sugar from concentrated fruit or vegetable juices but this is when they're used in excess of what would be expected in the same volume of the juice. So for example, if you're buying juice concentrate, if you're selling juice concentrate directly to a consumer, like orange juice concentrate, if it's not sugar in excess of what would normally be in the concentrate, in the juice, that is not considered added sugar. If you are adding sugar to adjust for the Brix amount in juice, that does not count as added sugar as long as you are going for the Brix level that's in the standard of identity for that fruit or vegetable juice. Fruit juice concentrates that are used to adjust the formula for jellies, jams, and preserves in accordance with standards of identity do not count as added sugar. Note the label must list the amount of added sugar in a serving and also the percent daily value. There is an exception if there's less than 1 gram and no claims are made about sweeteners, sugars, or added sugar. Then you can list not a significant source of added sugar at the bottom of the table of nutrient values. If a serving contains less than half a gram of added sugar, the amount may be reported as 0. There are 4 new voluntary nutrients. These do not need to be listed on the nutrition facts panel. Remember that nutrients listed on the nutrition facts panel must be either a mandatory or a voluntary nutrient specifically authorized by FDA in the regulations. No other nutrients can be listed on a conventional nutrition facts label. We'll talk about the difference in supplement facts label later. The mandatory nutrients must be listed either by listing the amount or a statement saying that the food is not a significant source of the nutrient. Voluntary nutrients are optional unless they're added, the food is fortified, or a claim is made about them. In the pre-existing regulations, the nutrition facts listed the voluntary nutrients as a percent daily value, but the specific quantitative amount of the nutrient was not listed. The new regulations still require the listing of a percent daily value, DV, but allow the nutrient quantitative amount to also be listed. These 4 nutrients, vitamin A, vitamin C, fluoride, chlorine, vitamin A and vitamin C were mandatory nutrients on the older label. They're no longer considered. Most Americans get enough of these vitamins, so they're not considered important enough to be mandatory nutrients anymore. Fluoride and choline are added as potential voluntary nutrients. The nutrient definitions are changing. This relates to the unit listings. The folate is a voluntary nutrient whose label unit is changing from micrograms of total folate to micrograms of dietary folate equivalents, DFE. This change in units follows the recommendations of the Institute of Medicine, and it is the unit that the Institute of Medicine uses to develop the DRIs, the Dietary Reference Intake Standards. This DFE unit accounts for the differences in the bioavailability between folate in the food and folic acid, the synthetic form. Basically, I mean, if you are doing folate calculations for your label, you should be looking in the regulation for the details about the formula, but basically 1.7 micrograms of synthetic folic acid equals 1 microgram DFE. Vitamin E is also a voluntary nutrient whose unit is changing from international units. It's changing to milligrams of alpha tocopherol. And just like folate, the change in unit follows the recommendation of the Institute of Medicine and reflects the most current science. And the change accounts for the difference in biological activity between naturally occurring and synthetic vitamin E. There are many forms of tocopherols, and the change in unit only includes the natural and synthetic alpha tocopherol because that is the only form that has biological activity and the only form that is maintained in the blood. So it's very similar. The synthetic vitamin E has only about half the activity as the naturally occurring vitamin E. So 2 milligrams of synthetic alpha tocopherol would be equal to 1 milligram of alpha tocopherol on the label. Niacin is another voluntary nutrient. The unit is changing from milligrams of niacin to milligrams of niacin equivalents. The new unit considers the body's conversion of the amino acid tryptophan into niacin, and it's a more accurate measurement of the bioavailability of niacin. This is the current science recommended from the Institute of Medicine. 1 milligram of niacin equivalents is equal to 60 milligrams of tryptophan. Dietary fiber is a mandatory nutrient, and it's getting a new definition. It's non-digestible carbohydrate, and for U.S. labeling, it is considered part of the carbohydrate total. Dietary fiber includes both soluble and insoluble, and these two can be reported voluntarily on the label, the soluble, insoluble. The previous labeling regulation did not have a definition for dietary fiber, but FDA now is adopting the Institute of Medicine recommendation for a definition, and the definition focuses on the fiber that's considered beneficial to human health. In the new regulation, non-digestible carbohydrates and lignin that are found naturally in plants, plus added fiber that has a beneficial effect to humans. This includes the normal fiber found in dietary fiber, but it does not include fibers such as inulin, which can be added to the product still, but they're just not included in the dietary fiber, but they would be included in the total of other carbohydrates. The regulation lists 25 isolated or synthetic fibers that are included in the definition. So this is something, again, you should look up in the regulation. Things like beta-glucan, psyllium husk, cellulose, guar gum, pectin, locust bean gum. There also are some unit changes you should be aware of. I've already discussed how the change for vitamin D on the international units. Also, vitamin A and vitamin E are changing from international units. And I've mentioned also the change in folate is changing to the micrograms of to DFE, dietary folate equivalents. There also is a new record keeping requirement. You are required to keep records supporting any label listings for dietary fibers, added sugar, vitamin E, folate, folic acid, and these records must be kept for 2 years. Obviously, the folic acid and vitamin E, which are voluntary, if you're not fortifying the food or making a claim about those and not listing them on the label, you don't have to keep these records. But dietary fiber and added sugar are mandatory, so you would have to keep these records. The reason for this change in record keeping is because it's not possible with the analytical methods to distinguish the amounts of these for nutrients by chemistry. It must be supported by documentation. Here's a chart just to give you a summary, an overview of the changes in daily values. These, again, are important because they affect the claims and also affect the labeling percentages on your label. Just highlight a couple of these. Fiber is going up. We need more fiber. Sodium is gone down slightly. Potassium has gone up significantly, but there are another number of other changes. FDA has updated the recommended amounts customarily consumed, the racks, and the serving sizes. By law, FDA, this is Congress, not FDA's decision. By law, FDA must base the serving size on the amounts of food and beverages that people actually are consuming, not what they should be eating. This is a common mistake about the serving size. I see this all the time. People looking at the serving size to see how much they should eat. It's not a recommendation. It is a reference amount. How much people eat and drink has changed since 1990. Actually, in 1990, FDA was using 1970s data that was available. And so now the reference amount for ice cream, which was previously a half a cup, has changed to 2/3 of a cup. And the graphic here shows you how this is going to change your label because a pint will now go from 4 servings to 3 servings. As before, package size can affect the serving size on the label, but the rules are changing. First off, the rack for soda has changed from 8 ounces to 12 ounces. But in addition, for packages that are between 1 and 2 servings, that is, they're larger than 1 serving, but up to 2 servings. For certain products, they will have to be listed as 1 serving per bottle. For certain products that are larger than a single serving, they're also going to be allowed to be listed as dual columns, so per serving and per package. An example would be a 24-ounce bottle of soda or a pint of ice cream. The dual column would list the amount per serving, and the second would list the per package. FDA has caught on to the fact that people are drinking the entire 24-ounce soda and eating the entire pint of ice cream. Here's just to highlight a couple other changes that the number of servings per container and the serving size declaration, which is here in green, are now in bolder type. Down below in the purple, the footnote at the bottom of the label has changed. It's smaller, and it's designed to better explain the meaning of the percent daily value. It's to put the nutrient amounts in context of a daily diet. Compliance dates. The law says 2 years from publication of the new rule, which were published in July 26. So manufacturers will have until July 26, 2018 to use the new labels, though I recommend you start trying to do the new labels as soon as possible. Anytime we have a big change like this, there often are glitches. The more good faith you put into trying to do it sooner rather than later, the more it pays off in the long run. There is also a small business exemption, not exemption, but delay. If you have less than $10 million in annual food sales, you're given until 2019 to comply. That's it for now. I hope you will take my advice and read a little bit of the preamble to the regulations. These really provide incredible insight into FDA's thinking and the reasons behind the regulations, and they will make you appear to be brilliant to your colleagues. That's it for now. I will see you in class.